Hey guys, if you're having this issue where your virtual machine times out whenever you're starting it up, so say you run Vagrant up and it takes an awful lot of time to start, and even when it has actually started, you're getting this message that it has timed out and that you should configure some timeout value, then this video is for you. Um, I have noticed that with people who are having this issue, the common denominator across is that your system resources are quite low. So, for example, you have low amount of RAM, and if that is the case, it then means that your computer is going to struggle to start up a virtual machine. And the way Vagrant works, from what I've studied so far, it automatically um, monitors resources because, for example, when you create a new virtual machine with Vagrant, it automatically allocates 40 gigabytes of hard drive space. Now, for the RAM, it does it dynamically, and for the CPU, it does it dynamically based on the available RAM that you have currently on your system at that time. So if you have 4 gigabytes of RAM, it will allocate 1 gig to that virtual machine. There's a chance that it might allocate a little bit more than that. And then for your CPU, if you have say a 4-core CPU, it will allocate 2 cores to that virtual machine. So this might be a problem for some people because um, sometimes Vagrant may not be able to calculate it properly. I don't know if it's a bug or sometimes it just happens that at the time when, even though Vagrant may have calculated it properly, at the time when you started the machine, maybe you have other running programs and services, especially on Windows, where things like that can be quite resource intensive. They can consume a lot of resources. So by the time it's trying to start, it's preventing it from starting up, and then you get this message after a long time, and you actually might observe that if you open VirtualBox even after you get this message, sometimes it gets stuck on where it says um, SSH key inserted. It's trying to, when it's trying to create the private key, it just gets stuck there for a very long time. Sometimes it just gets stuck at booting VM and then nothing happens. If you open up VirtualBox, you would observe that it has actually booted and it is running. So what happens is when the system load at that time is too much, it gets stuck. That VM will get stuck, and if your host, if your guest operating system, which is the VM that you're trying to start, if it does not return a response back to Vagrant that, hey, I have started and I am now running, Vagrant will time out and give you this error message with a suggestion that you should configure the boot timeout value, so that if after that specific period of time, if you configure a boot timeout value, if after that specific period of time that you've configured, it doesn't get any message, it will return and tell you, hey, that I couldn't get a response or something. It would essentially let you know that, look, your VM may have already booted and the timeout has been reached. you know so so many suggestions online indicate that you should try opening up VirtualBox, the GUI, that's the VirtualBox GUI, when you're starting the VM, so that it triggers Vagrant, or it triggers the VM to send a response back to Vagrant that, look, I have started. And it actually happened that way, at least for some people. For example, we noticed that when you open up VirtualBox, when you want to start the virtual machine in Vagrant, it starts properly. But if you close VirtualBox, it you won't get any response. Instead, what you get is this timeout after that period of time. So we were doing that, but it's kind of inconvenient. But what did we do? So I came up with something that might help, which is to specify how much memory and CPU that your virtual machine should use. And we observed that we didn't need to open VirtualBox anymore. It started properly. We shut it down, restarted it, and it started well. We shut it down again, restarted it, and it started fine without having to open VirtualBox or delete the VM and starting afresh and all of that. So for those of you who might be getting this error and starting afresh, you don't need to do that. Just follow what I will show you, and it's very simple, nothing complicated. So the first thing you do is open up your command prompt or terminal or git bash, whichever one you're using, and we're going to modify the vagrant file of that particular VM that is giving that error. So I'll just expand this, make it bigger. Okay, so let me just use this one. So I would since it's already running, so no problem. If it is not running, you can still do what you need. You can still edit the vagrant file before you run vagrant up. But if it's already running, you can still go ahead, edit the vagrant file, and then when you edit it, you now run vagrant reload. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to enter, so I'll just go back. Yeah. So like I said, you don't need to SSH. Sorry, that was an error. We need to edit the vagrant file for this particular VM. So this is what I want to use. So I will just edit this. So I'll do nano path. I'm doing this because I am not inside the directory. I'm not inside this directory. I'm doing it from outside. That's why I'm typing. That's why you see me typing the full path. So you can still do cd home. Sorry, you can still do cd. You can still change directory into the VM's directory itself, and then you can now do your nano vagrant file, whichever one that works best for you. The most important thing is go and edit the vagrant file. Now when you open up the vagrant file, just go all the way almost to the bottom. So okay, I have already edited this, but by default you might find it to be something like this. It might look like this. It might look something like this. Okay, so if yours is like this, all you need to do is uncomment this, uncomment this, uncomment VBGUI, and uncomment this line as well. You must uncomment it, if not anything you're doing there is useless. So you need this line, you can uncomment this and set it to false. This is the GUI. So what this is doing is that if you start the VM and this is false, it's not going to launch a VirtualBox window. If you set it to true, it will launch a VirtualBox window. Anytime you do vagrant up, it will always launch the VirtualBox window, but we don't need that. So set it to false. Now this is where you set the memory. So in my own case, my computer, I have 32 gigabytes of RAM. My RAM is 32 gig, so I can afford to set 2 gig. So this is the value of 2. This is 2048 megabytes, and you know, by calculation 2048 is equal to 2 gig. 1024. So if you do, sorry, I'll just come down here. So if you want to do 1 gigabyte to be 1024, that's 1 gigabyte. You can Google the calculations online. It's quite easy, nothing complex. Don't break your head over it. So you can go to a site like gbmb.org. So you can Google something like this. This is a converter, so I want to change. I want to see the value for 1 gigabyte. So I can click on GB. So you can see it's gigabyte conversion. So 1 gig is what? 1024 MB. So you see, if you put 2 gig and click on convert, it will convert it. So if you want to use Google, you can do something like 1 GB to MB, and it will show you the value 1000. Okay, so in your Vagrant file you do 1024, okay, and that's the amount of memory that you want, that's the amount of RAM that you want that particular virtual machine to use. Then for the CPU, you do watch how everything is aligned. You can see that nothing is scattered, so please be careful when you're doing this. vb.cpus, don't forget to put that S. If you forget it, it will not work. .cpus. So you set this to, now you can check how many cores that your computer has, but I recommend that you do not set this to more than 2 or 4. For most people, if you're using a Core i3 computer, for example, there's a chance that the maximum number of cores you have on that particular laptop is 4 cores, so you wouldn't want to set this to more than 2. If you're using a Core i5 or Core i7, there's a chance that the number of cores you have is set to 8, so you wouldn't want to set more than 4. But just to be on the safe side, if you have difficulty figuring it out, just set it to 2. Don't do more than 2. You can actually remove these quotes. You can use the quotes or you can remove the quotes, it will still work. But because according to the Vagrant website, the sample there shows that you can actually put it without the quotes, so it's not really necessary. Once you have done this, save, and then if you're not inside directory, or rather if the VM is not running, then you can just do vagrant up to start it. If it is running already, you do vagrant reload. You do vagrant reload, and it will reload. It will just restart the whole VM, because you remember, like I said in one of the videos, that every time you do vagrant up, it checks the configuration file, it checks that vagrant file for any new changes, and then reconfigures it according to what it finds there. Okay, so I can do vagrant reload. So you see it's going to attempt to shut it down, and then it's going to start it up again. So this is something you should probably do to get rid of that timeout issue. I do not have that issue, probably because my system has higher specifications, so I have never run into the timeout issue, but some people have run into it, and this is the workaround that we used, and it works just fine. Okay, so I can SSH into it, and it's fine. Okay. So this is one way you know whenever you do SSH, it shows you the system load, and by design, Vagrant Vagrant is set to, or rather, Ubuntu will terminate some things. It will fail to do certain things once this system load, goes above 2. Once it reaches 2.0, some things will not work. So for example, you might discover that some services will stop running until you start them yourself. It's by design, it's doing it automatically. Okay. And this is a memory usage, is a swap usage. So if I want to check now how much memory this particular VM is using, I can do something like free hyphen h. So you see, memory 976 megabytes. That's equal to, well, it's like 1024 basically. You can, if that measurement is confusing you, 976. So you see that all of the commands work. Okay, so this is, but you could just do free dash h. This is more relatable, you probably understand this more. So this mi just shows you is megabytes. So this is 1 gig. Right now it's using 155, so you have 462 left. If you go back to the Vagrant file and change it, okay, if you go back to the Vagrant file and change it, sorry, it's using 155, and then you have 670 left. So if you go to the Vagrant file and you change the configuration again, maybe you change the RAM to 2 gig, and then you come back to check this free h, you would see that this will reflect the total amount of RAM that you've allocated. So try out this solution and let me know if it helps you resolve that timeout issue. Yeah.